So Shan met Melody Hobson years ago when she came to speak at Emory. She interviewed her then as part of the business school's Executive Women's Program. And Melody co-hosts a Black Corporate Directors Conference in California each year, which is obviously invitation only, but Shan, you've been invited for the last 3 years, right? So you must be doing something right. For those of you who don't know Shan, she brings more than 30 years of experience in business operations, human capital management, transformation, enterprise risk management, community affairs, and economic development. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Journey Forward Strategies, a solutions-focused consulting firm that specializes in leadership development and organization effectiveness. Shan has served as executive director of Atlanta Committee for Progress, a coalition of leading CEOs focused on critical economic development issues for Atlanta. Earlier, she was chief transformation officer of Westrock Company, a paper and packaging solutions company. She's also served as vice president and general manager of Lockheed Martin Aeronautics Company, an aerospace and defense contractor. Shan joined the Intercontinental Exchange ICE Board of Directors in December 2020. She also currently serves on the boards of Veritiv Corporation, South State Corporation, and Georgia Power Company. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Biology and Religion from Emory University and an MBA from Emory's Guizetta Business School. She is a graduate of the Rutgers University Executive Masters in Global Human Resource Leadership Program. You've obviously chosen to use your time very wisely. Will you please come onto the stage and introduce Melody and lead us in the conversation around leading with purpose?
Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. When I thought about what I would say about Melody today, I tell you, I could be here for 30 minutes, right? But we've got a lot we want to talk to her about. But many of you actually introduced her for me this morning. I had someone to remind me, yes, she is a graduate of Princeton University. I should talk about that. Someone said to me, oh my God, Shan, she's a rock star. And I agree with that as well. I had the pleasure, as Adrian talked about, of meeting Melody when she came to speak for us at Emory. And I do remember one thing that she said that day. Melody, was this like 15 years ago, maybe, I think? It was a long time ago. But you told us to find our voices so that we could be heard as women, regardless of where we were in organizations. And I kept that and I held that. So thank you for teaching me as well as you taught those young ladies that day. Let me tell you just a little bit about Melody. I know you all had her bio, and I want to be quick here. She is co-CEO and president of Ariel Investments. She's also chair of the board of trustees for Ariel Investment Trust, which we'll talk about today during our discussion. She's also the co-founder of Ariel Alternatives, LLC. We'll talk about that project today. She is the current lead independent director for Starbucks Corporation. She's on the board of JP Morgan Chase. She was formerly on the board of Estee Lauder Companies and also a former board chair for DreamWorks Animation. She is an author. I hope you all will go out and buy this book. It is awesome. I brought 3 copies. One my little 8-year-old granddaughter is already reading. She's teaching me the history of money. Thank you, Melanie. And I've got one now for my 4-year-old. I want her to start early. And so I'm just excited to have Melody here with us today. There's a lot that she can share with us. She is absolutely indeed a trailblazer. Her strength, and many of you have probably seen her on the news many times. She's very strong and an expert in the financial industry. So I'm very grateful to have her with me today. I'm really excited. Got really excited, though, when Time Magazine in 2015 named her one of the most 100 influential people in the world. And so I am just so grateful for her presence with us today. As Adrian talked about, guys, she landed at 4 a.m. this morning, but was determined to be with us today. So I think that deserves an added round of applause. So Melody Hobson, please join me.
I'm so happy to be here, and landing at 4 was what I needed to do because I have an 11-year-old, and I have to stay with her every minute humanly possible before I leave to travel for the week, so it was the right thing.
Well, how many cities, countries have you been in, though, this week?
I've been around the world this week. We were in Paris and London, and then we went to Los Angeles, San Francisco, and here in 1 week.
This woman is busy, folks.
We're raising money for a new fund, and so when you get into that mode, you have your bag packed, and you're ready to go. Anyone who will meet with you, you will go and see them.
Right.
So-
Well, I want to talk about that. Let's just jump right in because I think that's really, really exciting. And so you've started this this fund, Aerial Alternatives LLC. And I know there are two projects that I really want to talk about. First, I want to talk about Project Black, and then Project Level, because I'm really excited about Project Level as well. So talk to us about what those projects are about, and then we'll talk about leadership.
So I'll start really quickly. During COVID, we were all locked in a room, as we all know, all of us everywhere. And I told our firm at Ariel, I said, we are going to slingshot out of this period. We are not limping. So we're just like a rubber band that's pulling back ideas, pulling back opportunity. And one of the things we did during that time, we brainstormed, where do we see opportunity? What do we think, what problems could we help solve? Because one thing about what we do at Ariel, we try to be original in our thinking and find the white space. And during that time, obviously, we were all quite overwhelmed by what was happening in the world, and particularly in America with the horrible killing of George Floyd. And many corporations came out during that time, and they talked about the need for their supply chains to be diversified, both figuratively and literally. Figuratively, because they were looking at who they were doing business with and seeing the inequity that was there, but literally because of the supply chains that were stuck because of COVID. And so we said, interesting, what if we could create minority businesses of scale to serve Fortune 500 companies in the most essential areas of their buying needs. I call it the essential workers of the supply chain. And we thought it was really an important issue because less than 5% of businesses in America that are Black or brown have over $5 million in revenue. So only 5% have more than $5 million in revenue. That means 95% of Black and brown businesses have less than $5 million. So if you are Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, et cetera, and you want to do business with Black and brown companies, it's very hard. You don't want to write 100 separate $2 million purchase orders. You want to write a $200 million purchase order. But we don't have businesses of scale to do that. So we said, let's go and create them. So let's go and buy middle market businesses that maybe aren't Black or brown before we buy them. By virtue of our ownership, I created this word, we minoritize them through our leadership, our board, through a whole host of issues. We seek to share equity throughout the organization, create a whole new paradigm of what companies could look like, create executive ranks that can go and lead companies around the world, become our own headhunters because we know where all the Black and brown talent is in the world, and ultimately create maybe a half-dozen billion-dollar Black businesses at a time when in the entire country, the entire United States, there are only 5 Black and brown businesses with over $1 billion in revenue. 5 in the United States. So we started this fund called Project Black. We raised $1.45 billion. It was one of the largest first-time funds ever raised. And we've been buying businesses since 2022. And the idea is to ultimately have the opportunity to work with very large companies, very large, where they see the opportunity to have, first of all, a world-class product or service, and then ultimately also at the same time be able to create minority businesses of scale. The first business we bought was a company called Sorensen Communications. Some of you may know it. They provide tech-enabled services to the deaf and hard of hearing. They are the largest in their category, based in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so if you are a company that has deaf or hard of hearing employees, first of all, they're incredibly loyal, very, very little turnover, but they need services that are provided to them, and our company does that. And then what we found was there was a big opportunity to also expand that product to B2C. So let's just say you walk into a store, you're deaf and hard of hearing, that technology would exist for you. And the interesting thing, and I think you can think about some of the people in your life, a very large percentage of our society goes deaf over time, particularly men, very large. And so it actually is one of these services that deaf is one thing, but hard of hearing is just as important. And it's one of these services that becomes essential over time. So when I said essential worker of the balance sheet, we want those businesses where the company, they have to have it. And again, if you have hundreds of thousands, millions of workers, you need to provide a service like this for them.
Wonderful. I love that. Now, but you're traveling this week because you're working on Project Level, which is focused on girls, I think. So talk a little bit about that.
So what we're doing, our core business at Ariel has been investing in public equities. And John Rogers, who started our company when he was 23 years old, was investing in small and medium-sized companies that are publicly traded, a lot of businesses that you would know, that once you get the customer, they come back again and again, businesses with very strong brands and franchises. Over the years, we've owned everything from when it was a small cap stock, Clorox bleach, and I always tell people, name a new number 2 competitor to Clorox, generic. Right? I always joke if my name could be Melody Clorox, I would sign up for that. You don't think to yourself, I'm going to buy bleach or feed my kid this week, right? It's like less than $1 a quart. So that's the kind of thing where it's a conglomerate of lots of brands. But just to find those businesses where once you get the customer again, they go back again and again. And we own everything from years ago Clorox to currently companies like Smucker that has peanut butter and jelly. The likelihood of kids eating peanut butter and jelly 20 years from now, we'd say pretty great. And then we own things like cruise line companies like Norwegian, which provide low-cost vacations to people. So many examples I could give you of businesses, again, once you get that customer. That's what we've done. In recent years, we've also branched out into private equity. It made a lot of sense because people said, in many ways, Ariel owned stocks for so long, we're like publicly held private equity. So we said, well, let's actually do private equity. So we started with Project Black, where we saw a need and a very specific reason to do that. And now our new thing we're doing is women's sports. And it's called Project Level. And women's sports is at an unbelievable inflection point. We are watching it in real time. I am ridiculous in my stats on sports. I'm like a 12-year-old who knows baseball stats. But every single category, attendance at games, viewership on television, sponsorships, media rights, merchandise sales, I could go on and on and on. The arrows are like this. It wasn't just Caitlin Clark. Certainly she was a part of the moment. And when we think about people like Serena Williams, who's one of the most, noteworthy athletes in the world, I think she has close to 18,000 followers. When you see what has occurred, you can see this tipping point has occurred. And now everything from the WNBA to women's soccer, a whole bunch of things have just taken off. But I call women's sports the small caps of sports. So the most expensive women's sports team in the United States is Angel City soccer team that was bought by Bob Iger from Disney and his wife Willow Bay in Los Angeles for $250 million. The most expensive men's sports team in the United States is the Dallas Cowboys that is worth close to $11 billion. A lot of space between $250 million and $11 billion. And we would say, if you want growth and value, you'd buy women's sports. Because the men's sports are getting to these nosebleed type valuations. They're really, really expensive. Now they've gone up a lot, but if you look at the opportunity for women's sports for that gap to narrow, they could double, triple, and still have a phenomenal return. Not to mention, if you look back to the early zeros versus now, an area like basketball, up 17 times in value, as an example, just since the early zeros. I live in San Francisco full-time, part-time. The Warriors were sold in the early zeros for just over $300 million. They're worth $9 billion today. So these are the kind of examples. Now we're saying we don't even have to get those numbers for this to play out in a big way. The other thing, girls are playing more sports.
Yes.
So if you look at high school, 8.4 million high school students play sports, 41% are girls. And most people don't realize the gap has narrowed in a very, very big way and continues to narrow. The other area that we really like, youth sports. I am shocked by how much money parents spend on their kids to play sports.
You're all spending it. Look at you.
I mean,
I can tell.
Those are unbelievable businesses. Soccer, basketball, the traveling team, all the gear, all of that thousands of dollars for regular income families. And so we said that in and of itself, you roll that up and you create those businesses around the country. I could give you an example of one women's league that has 60,000 girls playing today. 60,000. You would be shocked if I told you what it was, because you're like, really? 60,000 girls are playing to play this? It's not even soccer. And so there's a tremendous opportunity there, and we can move on, but we think women's sports is the next big opportunity. No one has done what we're doing at scale, so we're raising a big fund,
Awesome.
and to do this in a very different way. There is a fund out there that does men's sports. Their fund is $10 billion, and they own many, many teams. So we said we're going to do it differently. We bought our first team, which is the Denver women's soccer team, the expansion team. Ariel is one of the owners.
Okay, awesome. Is that not amazing? Is that exciting? Wonderful, wonderful. So if you guys are looking for things to do, I say you can join Ariel.
You're probably
here.
watching women's sports. I mean, who's watching women's
all of
sports
us.
right now?
All of
right.
us. Yeah, definitely.
The bigger names at the Olympics were women.
Well, I was telling Melody, when she was talking about all the wonderful sports teams we have here in Atlanta. And so we talked about the Atlanta Dream, and we talked about the new volleyball team that we have. And I was telling her that my granddaughter, she's 8, and she's going to be a basketball star. As soon as she figures out which way to go down the court, that's going to be the first thing. But I'm excited about. I'm so excited about that work.
But also it affects leadership. I know we're here to talk about
leadership. It does. We're going to go leadership. Yes.
So 70% of women who are in C-suites today played high school or college sports.
So that's
70%.
That's huge, but it also explains why I'm not in the C-suite, because I played no sports growing up, but okay. I'm learning so much
bit before Title IX. I didn't even go to a school with girls' sports.
Right.
They had tennis.
Exactly, wonderful. We're going to be supporting women's sports for sure. So Melody, we are going to transition to talk about leadership, particularly board leadership. So you serve on some of the most iconic boards, global boards in the country, in the world today. So what leadership lessons have you learned from helping companies navigate major challenges and transformations? Because we think about Starbucks and its history and the change that's happened there. I mean, you've been in the kind of the hot seat for a lot of this work that's happening. I know, look. I hate to bring it up, but let's talk about it.
I learned a lot in the last few years. I've been on the Starbucks board for 20 years. I'm officially going off at the next meeting, it's surreal. I can't even believe I've sat in this room for 20 years. I've been the chair for the last few years. And it was a real honor. I mean, it was a real honor. It was also a tremendous responsibility. I mean, there were some really hairy days there that it was as if it was Ariel, my own company, the decisions and the weight that I felt, certainly in a much bigger scale, because we have over almost 500,000 people who work around the world, 38,500 stores in 82 markets. You wake up every day thinking about these people, and it's important. It's important. It's their livelihood. It's their lives. And it's also a very important institution in the world in terms of what we've always stood for, how we've treated our partners, which is what we call employees, and how we feel that we should show up in our communities and in society. That is hardwired into this boardroom and into who we are. When Howard Schultz handed me the reins as chair, who founded the company, he told me, he said, Melody, I want you to picture 2 empty chairs in the boardroom at all times. One is a partner that works in a store, and one is a shareholder. And anything you say in this room, you better be proud to say in front of them. And he's just always remember they're sitting there and they're watching you. And those ghost seats became a really great North Star. And I thought it was a very smart thing that he did in anchoring me around the totality of the responsibility, not just making money, but understanding these livelihoods and these people. What I will tell you is from being there, especially during a point of transition, I have a very strong point of view, and I share this, that what Warren Buffett says, champions adapt. It's a simple 2 words. It's very hard to actually execute, but it is true. People who anchor in the past, in past success, in what was, will fail. And so a champion receives new information that comes to them and says, oh, this is different than before. It doesn't matter that I was successful before. It's not the same. once heard Brian Roberts from Comcast talk about this, and he said, around here, we're not waxing on about the good old days. We don't talk about the past. We talk about the future. And so when I sat in that Starbucks room over the last few years, there was a lot of conversation, both with each other and also in my own head, about what adaptations do we need to make in a changing world. And the world did change. COVID changed our patterns and behavior, in a radical way. And it's almost head spinning because you can't believe it happened so fast. But we know the versions of that in our own lives where that happened. At Ariel, as an example, before COVID, no one had our personal cell phone numbers in our office. In COVID, all of our clients call us on our cell phone. I mean, we barely use the phones in the office, right? And so these things do change. You can't go back. You can't try to force them back to the old number. And I know it's a simple analogy, but it's a very important one for looking forward. So how do you adapt to whatever the changing landscape is and expect it to change? You must expect it to change.
Absolutely. So as you think about sitting in the boardroom, you talked about that. So when you take on a board leadership role, how do you assess where a company needs to pivot or remain where they are to be competitive, to be relevant? So what drives you? How do you think about that process?
I have two things I do. Okay. So the first one, when I'm in a boardroom, I ask a very specific question. Would we do this if we were private? You get some amazing answers. I'm like, would we do this if we were private? And when people are like, if we were private all day long, I'm like,
really?
So why are we playing to the street? It's like, let's make the right decision for the long term, not how is Wall Street going to react on a short-term basis? So that's a very simple question. Would we do this if we were private when there are big existential questions or issues? The second one, ask questions, no statements. And know what I call equatements, where you're burying. Equatement is you really are burying a little bit of a question in a lot of verbose statements. So the reason I say ask questions is I think the best way to get to solutions in a boardroom, know-it-alls don't work. You're dropping in quarterly. Now in the situation with Starbucks, I was way more active than that. But you are trying to assess and you're governing. It is not your job to run the company. So I always find questions lead the witness without telling them what to do.
Right.
Because senior people don't want to be told what to do in their area of expertise. I'm doing a drive-by in retail, coffee delivery. It's not my day-to-day job, and they will know way more about it than I could ever learn. But I can ask big picture questions. So a lot of my board prep was only questions, nothing rhetorical, no obvious questions. It's like, how can I ask a question that is actually will lead to a breakthrough? So on a plane ride to to Seattle, I would say, I just want two. I have to have two original questions. Right. What area am I going to focus? Where is the key issue? Where I want to ask two original questions that could shift or lead to a conversation or a discovery that could help us, as opposed to trying to go in and tell the people who are every single day running the company what I think. And at that point, it truly is an opinion.
Right. So let's see. So thinking about that for the Starbucks board, J.P. Morgan Chase, you are a financial expert. Is it harder to do it there than at Starbucks?
Well, it's so funny at J.P. Morgan. So when I went on the board of J.P. Morgan, just as a backstory, super quick, I remember my first day, so I called my husband. He's in San Francisco. I'm like, it's my first day of school. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I am getting a PhD in banking and finance, and it's my first day of school. So I go into the lobby of JP Morgan, and I am literally saying hello to everyone. I'm like, hi, it's my first day of school. So the head of HR calls, and they're like, we're very aware you're in the building. And I said, why? She's like, people are like, she's talking to us. And there was only one of me, so I was kind of memorable.
It was you.
But there wasn't another at the time, and so I was kind of memorable. So when I got there, I would go into the meetings, and interestingly, on the JP Morgan board, I'm the only person who comes out of the investment business and finance. So we have, superstar board members. I mean, this is Mecca. This board is, one of the most important. It's the largest bank in America,
Yes.
the 8th largest bank in the world, and the 7 banks that are bigger in front of us are Chinese. That's it.
Wow.
We are as a global bank, we are it. Now, there are a lot of great banks, so please don't take that wrong, but in this scale,
Right.
JP
Oh,
Morgan
yes.
is in a very special place. And so it's super interesting because in the boardroom, we get subject matter that comes up, and it's dense. I mean, I took a flight from London to New York, 7 hours of reading, and I didn't finish.
Oh, gosh.
Did not finish. So I had to wake up at like 3 in the morning and keep reading. 7 hours of reading straight, and I didn't finish. So, and there are a lot of acronyms. I carry around this Bible of acronyms.
Right.
And so it's dense, but I will tell you the one thing about the subject is there are subjects I really know. And so we get these presentations and I'm like, oh my God, we're doing credit scores, awesome. And the board members are like, and I'm like, I know a lot about this. So there is that fun of being in your wheelhouse.
Right, yes.
And there's so many lessons and learnings I can take back to Ariel. So I feel like I gained so much from the experience. But because I feel I gained so much, I feel like I really want to be a smart, really prepared contributor.
Wonderful. Well, good for 7 hours. I think.
Oh, I didn't finish.
Oh gosh, I would have quit. Okay.
Oh, no, a book could be 1,000 pages.
Oh, I know. Oh gosh.
Or more. More.
Don't ever invite me to that board. just saying.
And I
just saying.
I can't read it on the iPad very well, so I
Right.
carry the books.
Yes.
Which they don't like. They're like, we do not
No.
like that you print these books, Melody. And I'm like, but I can't do that for hours.
Yes.
I just can't.
Yes. Well, I knew you'd be the most prepared board member for sure. Just knowing.
Well,
just
no,
knowing you.
this is a
knowing you.
room of, this room is filled with, some of the most successful business people ever. So, it's not about me at all, but it's fun to be there.
Wonderful. Good. Let's talk about leadership and leadership lessons. That's what we're here trying to always improve our leadership, skills and styles and things like that. So you're absolutely a trailblazer. So what is one of your most recent leadership lessons that you've learned? And tell us how you came to learn this lesson.
Everything I'm learning right now, I'm on like the path of hard knocks. I think that's when you learn. They say you don't learn in success, you learn in great challenges. So I feel like life is kind of knocking me around a little bit. I'm not saying that with any, I'm not looking for sympathy. I've had some challenges that have really been teaching me a lot lately. And I always say in my times of greatest stress, what am I supposed to be learning? Because I'm like, why does this feel so overwhelming? Why does my chest feel tight? What am I supposed to be learning? Some of it is just to learn how to deal with the stress. Just how do you calm your mind and spirit in times of great difficulty. And in the world of investing in the last couple decades, I tell people we've become firefighters. It's like you had the financial crisis, then you had COVID, then you had, try picking stocks when there are no revenue. Like there is no modeling for your work. That is something that is just extremely challenging. And you have to develop resilience. And I think it's very much like being in a gym and developing muscles. It's like things that were hard a year ago, maybe in the gym, if you stick with them, they get easier because your body gets acclimated to the stress of it. And so that is one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is how to calm my mind in times of great emotional stress because of something that's going on in the world or in the markets, etc. And there have been many moments that I've done that, and I think I've gotten better at it. But the most important one that I've learned lately, my husband says to me, he's like, Melody, I married Yoda's dad, right? I always tell people. And George is extremely wise. He's a little crazy uncle, but he's also wise. And his wisdom it comes in unexpected moments, very profound pearls, where there are times I'm married to him and I'm like, I'm so lucky I got to hear that. But he always tells me things like in a moment, like I'm kind of bitching about something. And he's like, Melody, you must forgive people for being human. I'm like, write that down.
Right. So I'll write that down.
Forgive people for being human. He told me one day, he's like, I was working on something and I was talking about how we were going to do something, and he's like, it's not Ariel.org. He's like, it's .com. It's not a philanthropy endeavor. And he says, it's called, it's not personal. He's like, one of the most important lines in all of movies is actually true in life. He's like, in that moment in The Godfather when he says, it's not personal, it's just business. He's like, if you could just remember that, you will take a lot of emotional stress out of your life. It's not personal. And he's like, it's called show business, not friends business. And he's like, so you have to remember in these moments when you feel some kind of personal, emotional, it just isn't. It's just people. They're looking after themselves, they're looking after their interests. And if you can take, not with a lack of empathy, but if you can take this personal feeling out of it, there is no affront to you. You just happen to be the recipient of whatever happened. You will actually manage better and you will be more even keel. And so those are my recent ones about forgiving people for being human. It's not personal. It's not called friends business. Those are the things that I'm thinking about a lot. So when we see even what we're seeing right now in terms of comments or, what might viscerally cause a reaction, you have to sort of remind yourself, it's actually not about you.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Very good leadership lessons, Rotarians. Wonderful. So what advice would you give emerging leaders, those folks who are wanting to make an impact in corporate America? What advice? You met some of our students here today.
Yeah, they were terrific.
And they were so excited to meet you and to be with you. But what advice would you give them?
I would tell them there are two things. The first one I would tell them is do what they love. I think a lot of times, especially young people, they get into this loop of this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or this is the job I'm supposed to have, or the title I'm supposed to have, and they actually don't like the job. They can't be successful. I've had those people work at Ariel, and you want to just actually walk them down to the street and put them in an Uber. I used to say taxi. Yeah, right. I don't say that anymore. Put them in Uber, pay for it for them, and just say, go do what you really are going to love. Right. Because this isn't fun for any of us.
Right.
Your energy and you don't like this. Yes. And that is totally fine. And you shouldn't do it because of a paycheck. You shouldn't do it because you should actually just do what you like. Second thing, do not make any important life decisions based upon money. Zero. None. Because I've seen people make really bad decisions based upon, I could change to this company for an extra 10 grand with people I don't know, may not like, don't know what it'll be, when I actually like these people in this job and I'm gonna make that trade. You're nickel and diming yourself. And there are a lot of other examples I can give you, and John Rogers taught me that. And it's odd that a person from an investment firm would say it, but do not make big life decisions based upon money. And then the last one is, which I think is very important, which is I think you have to be it's what I told you 15 years ago in that room, you have to be true to yourself. Yes. I'm just amazed by the compromises that people will make on things that they don't believe or become complicit. You have to be, I will not betray my values for any amount of money, for any status, for any title, for any people. It will not happen. It won't.
Excellent.
I would live in a studio apartment in Chicago and be with my 11-year-old and George and be happy than to sell myself out, because long-term that does great emotional damage to you.
Wonderful. I love that. That deserves a round of applause right there. That's awesome. That's absolutely wonderful. So speaking of things that are very important to you, I know you've worked long and hard in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout your career. Let's talk about D&I. I mean, it's not very popular these days, but again, I know you just talked about things that you value and being strong to that. Talk to us about what you think the fate of DE&I will be in this country and our organizations, and how do we get organizations who really have that as a core value to continue the work?
Well, this is obviously happening in real time, and this is hard. You know, I can tell you this is where I have been very emotional, and that I'm trying to manage my own state and head, literally, like mantras. I was getting dressed this morning, and the person who was doing my hair, they were like, "Are you praying?" I said, "Yes." They were like, "I've never seen you do that." I was like, I have to point out every possible scenario because my mind is being affected. And so it's really just to calm my mind. You know, I was like, I fear for the repercussions of the repossessed, let me call it, of swagger. There's a swagger right now. You can sort of say things, but it does real damage. And for people who are not as accomplished or resourced or confident, it could be life-changing. And that is affecting me. I'm thinking about kids, and I'm very emotional about it. And what will they think if somehow they're being cast in the framework of their color determines how people think they're prepared or not, which goes all the way back to Martin Luther King, right? We're back to the content of your character, not the color of your skin, and that we could slip so fast. So what do? I say, for corporate America, I'm holding out to one very simple idea that I've always had. Math has no opinion. The math will lead people to their own self-interest, which will lead them to inclusive practices, because they will need that those inclusive ideas for innovation and for customers. And I think at the end of the day, that will rule the day. We can change the name of it, we can call it whatever you want to call it, but I think people will be affected by economics. And that's what clearly time has proven. And so I think our values will now be influenced by the pocketbook.
Yes.
And the pocketbook will be affected if you are exclusionary, because you won't be able to meet the need. You just won't. And there'll be a lot of examples of that over time, because society, this country is a melting pot. And that is what makes us great, more than any country in the world.
Thank you. That I am praying with you. I'm hearing footsteps. Just two more quick questions, but I am praying with you. The children's book. You wrote this fabulous New York Times bestseller. So what inspired you to write the book, and how do you plan to expand this mission?
I was inspired because I was in COVID, saying we're going to slingshot out. And the idea was, we don't admire problems at Ariel. You know, we say we've admired this problem long enough, and the problem was a financially illiterate society. So I said, I'm going to write a book about money for kids, but I'm using kids as the gateway to the parents. I want them to read this book and then realize, aha, 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 as they're reading to the child. Very much in the spirit of when I was chairman of DreamWorks. The DreamWorks movies were always written to adults and children at the same time. So the jokes were always dual. So there was a joke that the parent understood, and they're like, that's funny. The kid had no idea, but the kid was laughing at something different. So I tried to have the book be that kind of thing, where it has a sophistication to it, but a simplicity to it. And at the end of the day, everyone tells me it's working. 9 weeks on the bestseller list, number 2 right now. for children, and there's so many facts in there that what I want you to do is I want you to read it to your kid and then go to a cocktail party and say, "Did you know?" And then wow your friends at a cocktail party.
Okay, 2 quick fun ones. First one, are you a Star Wars fan? People need to know.
Puts food on our tables. What do you think
That answers that question.
But this is actually true. First movie I ever saw in a movie theater.
Really?
Now my husband gets a little freaked out when I say that. Because I was 9. We're 25 years difference. I was like, I think it was the first movie I ever saw. I said it was either Star Wars or First Encounters of the Third Kind, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he looked at me, and this is our first date, and he was like, yes, it was. And I said, how do you know? He said, they came out the same year.
Wow. One quick one. So as a Rotarian club here, what would be our call to action if you had to give us one? What would be our call to action?
Don't stand there, do something.
Correct. Wonderful. Got it.
What an incredible conversation. Shan, thank you for leading us in that. So much resonated with me. Spending money on my daughter's sports, leadership lessons for my partners, it's not about you. And don't stand there, do something, which is back to our invocation about how we spend time. So thank you for being here. I want to open it up to members to ask a couple of questions. If anybody would like to, there's going to be time for 2 questions, so you've got to be Charlie Crawford to the microphone.
What'd you say? Don't give a statement, give a question?
Yeah.
No appointments.
No appointments. That's a new Rotarian word. No appointments.
Appointments.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Melody, thank you for being with us. I suspect you're aware of Jamie Dimon's recent comments with regard to work from home versus demanding employees come back to the office. Will you share your thoughts, whether it's JP Morgan Chase or other businesses, about remote working?
Yeah, we went to 5 days very recently. I just announced it. I agree. I think one of the things that has happened, at least in certain businesses, I think work from home has required more people. You're less efficient than, and you can just see that in hiring practices. We looked at it for our own firm. I've seen it in other numbers. The other thing that I think that, and more bureaucracy, because you're spending so much time emailing instead of just walking next door. The number of times I say to our team, off email, like, this is too hard to solve this way. And the email is now in its 11th cycle or something like that. I said, after 3, you must stop and meet. Because this gets out of hand, then you're reading back because you can't even follow with the original. When you're scrolling back, there's a problem. Like, what was this original? Where were we? And I'm trying to follow it along. That just tells you have a different kind of inefficiency and bureaucracy. And the last thing I would say, okay, we may all know how to do our jobs in our sleep, but the 25-year-old doesn't. And they desperately need us. We got so many verbal and nonverbal cues from our leaders. And we need that. And with them not being in the room with us, they're not going to get it. We're going to lose a whole generation in business that we're going to need to keep America, vibrant and leading. I also want to say I do think it's important to be. I am not in any way ignoring the flexibility that certain people need, but I think that tail should not wag the dog. You should be able to have an and solution, not an or.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hobson. Thank you so much for your commentary. As a fellow professional in asset management, you have always been a trailblazer and someone who I think of in leadership in terms of North Star. As you've evolved in your career, you talked a little bit about this, but as you evolved in your career and stayed true to your core value system, what are 2 or 3 deal breakers that you've had the privilege of calling deal breakers now that you did not maybe 20 years ago?
I actually don't think that they're different, and this is where I'm going to say I think it's led to some of the success that I've had because I've been consistent as a leader. The first thing I would tell you is that I believed I was a leader when I was 22. I didn't think that I was supposed to wait for someone. I was supposed to try to figure out a solution. And so one of the deal breakers for me would be I would not be in any environment where my opinion just really didn't matter. If it didn't, I didn't want to be there. And I would have found a place to go where it did, and it from day one mattered at Ariel. The second thing I would tell you, and I feel very strongly about this one, I will not work with assholes.
All right, Stephanie, last question.
I don't know how to follow that.
Mrs. Bostic, I'm sorry, we don't normally speak like that at Rotary.
But it's true.
If the
They
shoe
will
fits.
take years off of your life, really. And I saw that very early on. It's like if that was the choice, I needed to go find another place to be.
So as someone who has spent a good portion of my adult life in a sports family, and professional sports family, but also has a son who played all the way, starting from age 3 up to through college. One of the things that I've been talking to some of the professional sports guys about is the lack of opportunity and the difference we see in young athletes who can't afford all of the access. And one of the things that has concerned me is the professionalization of youth sports and how it's actually creating even more barriers. So when you talk about your entry into that, what will you do to ensure that young athletes who don't have some of the advantages that all of our children do continue to have access to the best sports programs, to the best fields, to the best coaches? Because right now there's a big drop off.
I actually think you can solve for that. And I think you can solve that through the philanthropy inside of the organization and make sure they create opportunities for those who are disadvantaged. I also think that already exists. When you look at the difference in practice facilities, gymnasiums, et cetera, from schools that have money and those who don't, it's epic. And so some of these youth sports can actually level that playing field, especially for girls who don't get the same opportunity to play with the same equipment or with the same kind of standards. The other thing we think about some of the youth sports, they're professionalizing some of this so that, for example, parents who go and scream at coaches or scream at children are ejected from the game, banned. We think those things are good. We think those things create the right environment for especially girls to thrive and to grow. And in the absence of that, you have some of these circumstances that have been very, very bad. So there are some real pluses here, but we agree with you. I'm all about access and opportunity. I grew up with nothing. When I mean nothing, nothing. The youngest of 6 kids to a single mom, evicted, phone disconnected, lights turned off. And so my lens is always going to be, how do we create an opportunity for those who don't? I didn't get to take any lessons or do anything because we had no money. My daughter takes piano. She's in running club. She's rode horses. I can go through all of those things. It's not a fair fight. I know it.
That's very well said. Melody, thank you for your time. Shan has arranged something special to end off our program today. She's bought an extra copy of the book that Melody will personally sign to whomever can answer the right question to do Mr. George Lucas proud. So I could ask something easy. Star Wars nerds lean in, right? Like, what does Darth Vader really mean? That's too easy. And Gina, thank you to your husband for helping me with all these questions. I know what he does in his spare time. So here's the question. Whoever answers first gets the book. What was the original name of Return of the Jedi? Anybody? Yes, Clark Dean.
Revenge of the Jedi.
And why was it not called Revenge of the Jedi?
Because he decided that he needed to return, not revenge.
That's exactly right. Well done, Clark. Come on up and get your book. All right, so next week, we've got a Power Women panel, Energizing the Future of Power and Utilities in a Booming Atlanta with Kim Green, Beth Lowry, and Commissioner Tricia Pridemore. I want to remind you all, on April the 21st, please put this in your calendars. That's going to be Rotary on the Road down at Trilith Studios. Our Chick-fil-A friends are going to work hard at making us welcome, including allowing offices for us to work in beforehand and afterwards. I challenge you all to find a Rotarian you don't know well and maybe carpool there and back. So look forward to that. Melody, this is unbelievable. What a great program. Shan Cooper, thank you so much for being who you are. Have a great week. This program's adjourned.